The entire recorded history of China. Spanning 5,000 years. Hundreds of dynasties. And thousands of rulers. Only one woman. Ever. Declared herself emperor. Not empress. Not queen. Emperor. The highest title. In the most powerful empire on earth. She rose from being a teenage concubine. A glorified servant. To ruling over 50 million people. For 47 years. Alone. And when she finally died, she left behind an order. That her tombstone remained blank. No name. No title. No words. Just stone. She said, "Let history decide what to write about me." This is the story of Wu Zetian. The only female emperor in Chinese history. And possibly the most remarkable ruler the ancient world ever produced. The year is 637 AD. Wu Zetian is 14 years old. And she has just been summoned to the imperial palace of Emperor Taizong, one of the greatest emperors in Chinese history, to serve as a concubine. A fifth-rank concubine. The lowest possible entry. In a court of hundreds of women. All competing for the emperor's attention. All dressed identically. All trained to be silent. Obedient. Invisible. Wu Zetian was none of these things. From the very first day. She was different. She could read. In an era when almost no women were educated. Wu Zetian had devoured books. History. Philosophy. Politics. Literature. She could write poetry. She could hold conversations that left scholars speechless. And she had something else. Something that cannot be taught. And cannot be learned. An almost supernatural ability. To read people. To understand what they wanted. What they feared. What they would do. Before they knew it themselves. Emperor Taizong noticed. He named her Wu Mei, meaning, beautiful. She served him for 12 years. And when he died in 649, Wu Zetian faced the fate of every concubine whose emperor had passed. Her head was shaved. She was sent to a monastery to live out her days as a Buddhist nun. Forgotten. Finished. The story, it seemed, was over. It had barely begun. But Wu Zetian had one advantage. Before Emperor Taizong died, his son, the crown prince, had visited his father and noticed her. When the son became Emperor Gaozong, he remembered the woman with the sharp eyes and the sharper mind. He summoned her back from the monastery. And Wu Zetian, who had spent 2 years preparing for exactly this moment, walked back through the palace gates. And never looked back. Within 2 years, she was the emperor's favorite concubine. Within 4, she had outmaneuvered the empress. Within 6, she was empress herself. Her rivals at court called her dangerous. They were right. She was. But dangerous does not mean wrong. As empress, Wu Zetian did something no one in the imperial court expected. She governed. Not quietly from behind a curtain. Not through whispered suggestions to her husband. She read state documents. She gave military orders. She reformed the examination system, so that talented men from poor families could rise through merit. Not just birth. She lowered taxes on farmers. She expanded the empire's borders. She promoted women to positions of authority. For the first time in Chinese history, Emperor Gaozong began to suffer from illness. Severe headaches that left him unable to perform his duties. And gradually, almost imperceptibly, Wu Zetian began doing them for him. Every decision. Every edict. Every war. Every appointment. The emperor sat on the throne. But Wu Zetian was the one ruling China. Emperor Gaozong died in 683. And for a brief moment, the empire held its breath. Two of Wu Zetian's sons took the throne in quick succession. Both were removed. One by her, because he was incompetent. The other, because he threatened her authority. Her enemies at court. The old aristocracy. The men who had spent their entire lives believing that power belonged to them, rose up against her. They called her ruthless. They called her a monster. They wrote pamphlets condemning her. They plotted her removal. Wu Zetian crushed every single one of them. Not with anger, not with cruelty for its own sake. With precision. She created an intelligence network. A system of informants that reached into every corner of the court. Anyone who plotted against the empire was found and dealt with. In 690, at 65 years old, Wu Zetian did something that had never been done in 5,000 years of Chinese history. She abolished the Tang Dynasty, founded her own dynasty, the Zhou, and declared herself Huangdi, emperor, not empress regent, not acting ruler, emperor. In her own right. In her own name. The court that had dismissed her as a concubine, now bowed before her. The scholars who had said a woman could never rule, now read her edicts. The generals who had doubted her, now carried out her orders. Wu Zetian, the fifth-rank concubine, was now the most powerful person on earth. At 65 years old. She was just getting started. Wu Zetian ruled as emperor for 15 years. And by almost every measure, she was extraordinary at it. Under her rule, the Tang Dynasty, now her Zhou Dynasty, reached the peak of its power. The economy grew. The military expanded. The civil service, reformed by her merit system, became the most efficient in Chinese history. Agriculture flourished. Trade routes extended. The arts were patronized. She was 80 years old. And still governing one of the largest empires on earth. But age is the one enemy no ruler ever defeats. In 705, as she lay ill in the palace, a group of court officials staged a coup. They forced her to abdicate. Restored the Tang Dynasty. Gave the throne back to her son. And erased, as thoroughly as they could, every trace of her dynasty. Her Zhou dynasty lasted only 15 years. Her name was struck from official records. Her achievements were attributed to others. Her story was buried. And then she made one final decision. She ordered her tombstone to be left completely blank. No name. No inscription. No defense. Just stone. As if she knew that history would eventually say enough on its own. Wu Zetian died in 705 AD. She was 81 years old. She had spent 47 years at the center of power. More than almost any ruler in Chinese history. She had risen from the lowest rank of the imperial court to the highest title on earth. With no army of her own at the start. No family connections. No inheritance. Nothing. Except her mind. Today, Chinese historians are deeply divided about her. Some call her a ruthless manipulator. Some call her the greatest ruler the Tang Dynasty ever produced. Most call her both. And perhaps that is exactly right. Because the lesson Wu Zetian leaves us is not about being good or being ruthless. It is about something simpler. The world will always tell you what you cannot be, what you cannot do, what ceiling you cannot break. Wu Zetian heard every one of those voices. And then she walked into the palace, sat on the throne, and ruled. This has been Untold Chapters. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe, because the next chapter is already waiting.